dusk, welcome to Realm of the Sacred Roots. Today I wanted to talk about the prophetic and the shamanic. Just to give you a little background, because I want to jump right into it, I was raised in the church and I've always been a little different. I never really quite fit in. And so I started to learn the reason why. It was because I was meant to walk more of a prophetic path. And so as time went on, I started to understand what the prophetic actually meant and what it meant for those type of people for profit. And the journey that they had to walk was a lot different than what the other fivefold ministry, I guess you can call it, had to walk, whether it was teacher, preacher, apostolic. They all have their own journeys that they have to walk, their own challenges and beauties to them. But the prophetic has always been a different beast. I just can't explain it any other way. As I started to travel on my journey and sort of, when I say leaving the prophetic, it really wasn't leaving the prophetic, but it was leaving that particular path for a second in order for me to go on my journey. And so I ended up going on my journey into a darker place and then coming back out into what was more of what I call the shamanic side. And it was different, but really wasn't that different. Instead of some of the things I used on the prophetic side and the shamanic side, I was working with plants and I was working with animals and more with nature, whereas I really wasn't taught that while I was in the church. And it wasn't that when I went back to look into the Bible that they didn't speak of those things that I used while walking as a shaman. It was just that the preachers didn't necessarily expound on and or interpret the word and the scriptures in the way that I would have, or most people who had more of an open mind seemed as if they would interpret the Bible. It was very much black and white, and here's how they saw it. Whereas those that I've walked with that have more of an open outlook on life are okay with working with the plants and the animals and mother nature, and it's okay. It's not so taboo, whereas I think most people in the Christian realm would say stay away from that. So getting back on track, I was noticing that there were a lot of similarities between the prophet and the shaman. Now there are major differences as well. But in this video, I wanted to discuss a lot of the things that I thought were similar in my walk. So there's the disclaimer, what I found similar as working in the prophetic and what I found similar working in the shamanic side of things within my journey. So if you're on either side and you haven't experienced this, that's okay. This is just what I so happen to experience. And some haven't traveled both sides. And so I figured you might be curious on the similarities that I have found on my path. So the first one was sometimes the prophetic type will come across as either extreme or moody, that type of unbalanced type. And I would say the same for being on the shamanic side. People would accuse us of being that type of eccentric, moody. Those are just some adjectives that I can think of that would describe when you see someone that is of that nature. And that to me crossed both sides because I am still some of those things. So I thought that was interesting on both sides. I've seen that even with my friends who travel, who have walked on both of those sides. It seems to be true. And as we go through the list, you'll actually probably see why this is the case. It just so happens. We also have gifts that differ from the others. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily better than the others, but we do have gifts that differ from the most. And again, I'm talking about both sides. It was the same thing. It wasn't, at least on the shaman side, where we travel different realms, or we're able to travel from the living to the dead. We just astral travel, we're able to also travel in that sort of manner, and also shape shifting. These things just seem like they're easier for us, and maybe would characterize some of the shamans that I know. So it doesn't mean that we're better than a witch or whatever else you'd want to call somebody else in this type of walk, but we just have different gifts. And doesn't mean that a witch can't do those things. Again, these are just things that I have found characterize some of the shamans that I know in myself. But it would be the same on the prophetic side, where their gifts are different than a lot of the other ministries that are in the church. Again, we're not better necessarily, but we do have different gifts that somewhat set us apart. And I wouldn't want to be anything else. I am happy to be where I'm at. Also, on the prophetic side, the training does involve a lot of crushing and breaking, is what I would call it. I wrote down some notes to make sure I got all of these bullet points for you, but it seems like it would almost be incomprehensible for others to handle if they knew the breaking and the crushing as a prophet that you would have to go through in order to have the character, let's say, that God would want you to have. And on the shaman side, we have this death and rebirth. We really do, of this constant breaking of ourselves, this constant death and rebirth where we're being broken. And that's just part of who we are. And so again, I see that same theme across both sides, constantly being broken and having to be reborn. This is just the characteristics of who we are and what it is. Like I said, I wrote some notes down. Also, they say that we have a source of kind of this dark moodiness, maybe, that plagues us, and constant seasons of crucifixion that would require us to, again, back to the breaking again, but this sometimes characterizes why our mood might be so dark. And it is back to the death and rebirth. And most of us do have this dark kind of moody flavor to us, and it just is what it is for us. And I've seen it on both sides. I've experienced it on both sides. They say we have these eccentric personalities as well. And it just is. And we've also had our sheer fear of rejection. And I mean, I would have said that was my middle name growing up, was rejection. And I feel like that is on both sides. We just don't fit in. We've never been like the others. We don't think like the others, and we don't feel like the others. We just simply don't. And even as a child, seeing things, angels, demons, you are just different, and you have that rejection. It's just part of who you are. And I don't want to say you get used to it, but this is just, I've seen this on both sides. We have dreams, we have visions. We just see things that others cannot. The prophetic, the prophets can, and so do shamans. And I think that sets us apart. And again, that would be another similarity. Loneliness and isolation would be another one. I mean, people don't know all the time how to relate to us, and we don't always know how to relate to others. I think walking this path, I've come to accept that loneliness and isolation are my friends, almost to a point, I could say, because that is the road that you walk. When you tell people that you're seeing things, that you hear things, they look at you and think that something is wrong with you, that you have a mental disorder. They think that maybe she's schizophrenic. These are things that after a while you learn just not to say. You learn not to express yourself, because that's just not, it's not normal, right? That other people don't experience those things. So that would be on both sides. And they say that the prophet is broken and wounded like so many others. And then actually, they say even more so than others. And this would also be on the shaman side, for both. And then life threatening events would probably be my last one. They say that this goes for people that have a high calling, people that that's what we call a high calling, but people who have this brush with death. Usually it's in childhood. Usually it is that you're born with the umbilical cord wrapped around your neck. It's when you have near death experiences, those type of things, and usually quite a few back to back. And that happened to me when I was younger. There's so many things. My parents got into a car accident when my mom was pregnant with me, a really bad car accident. And as I grew older, I climbed up on a balcony on the 20 something floor, and my mom had to scream for me to, or something told her to get up, and she screamed at me and rushed to grab me before I went over on the balcony. I ripped away from my mom when I was walking in New York traffic, and ran into the middle of traffic. It's just one thing after another. After usually these things, this type of and even near death experiences I've had, those type of things usually characterize the prophetic and the shamans. The ones, of course, there have been ones that have put to death and brought back, but those type of things characterize these groups of people. And I'm not saying this is for all prophets and not saying this is for all shamans, but I am saying this is what has been characterized in my life, and what I have found true. And I was sitting there one day and I just started going through the list, and I'm like, wow, this actually, there's quite a few similarities, but I also found some differences. So what I'll do is another video on the differences, so I don't run too long on here. That way you can kind of see what I have found. And there are plenty more similarities as well. I just did the ones that I could think of off the top of my head. If you think of any more, feel free to write them down below, comment on here, and write some of the similarities that you have found or that you know of for the prophet and the shaman. And I will do a video on the differences probably sometime this week and post it so you can see it. And I'm curious to know what you find to be true and what other things you can think of for similarities. So thank you again for watching, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you enjoy these videos, and I'll be making more soon. See ya.